Alright, y'all, so today I want to do a very quick video on a pretty fascinating topic, and that is I want to talk about the cancellation of DC's Earth 1 Aquaman. Yep, believe it or not, as part of the DC Earth 1 imprint, we could have gotten an Earth 1 take on Aquaman, which is obviously just really exciting. Now, to give you a little context on like what Earth 1 was, Earth 1 was a series of graphic novels that were released in the 2010s to the early 2020s, where basically they would present different takes on classic DC superheroes with big profile artists and writers attached to them in a graphic novel format. And there was a total of 5 of these titles released. There was Superman, there was Batman, there was Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Titans. And I initially thought that's all there actually was and planned. But believe it or not, Earth 1 was also could have had potentially more titles. There was a Flash title announced, and of course, the subject of this video, there was a title for Earth 1 Aquaman announced. Now, this was announced back in 2015 with the artist and writer Francis Manapal, who is a writer and artist who's worked for DC for quite a while. He had handled some titles like Trinity and his Justice League run. So he's definitely had a long history with the company. Now, in terms of what his run and what it could have been, there's been sadly no details about what the plot was going to be or what his take on Aquaman was going to be. We've only got really tiny snippets of what this comic book could have been. The title image here, as you can see on your screen, that was the proposed logo for Earth 1 Aquaman, believe it or not. There's also another bit of artwork kind of floating online with Arthur as Aquaman in his classic orange suit. Not exactly sure if it's confirmed that is a planned drawing for this comic book, but it seems pretty likely. Of course, he also on his Instagram released some panels of what it seemed like Arthur's backstory to be explored in this comic. So like I said, there was definitely some development, and Francis was absolutely working on this book. But besides some very tiny updates, we really just didn't know anything about this comic book for the longest time, and it seemed like Aquaman just kept getting delayed and delayed. And delay is definitely a very common word when it comes to the Earth 1 series, because books, especially, the way they were being released, were constantly getting delayed. Sometimes you would get volume 2 in like this year, and then like 3 to 4 years later, or maybe luckily 2 years later, you would get another volume. So nothing was ever really consistent. So we would just, like I said, it seemed like this book kept getting delayed. It also seemed like Francis himself was really busy with a lot of work on DC and working on other projects. This apparently included Trinity, No Justice, and of course his Justice League run. So, like I said, he seemed like he had his plate full, and we just didn't hear anything. It was radio silence for the longest time, not until, sadly, 2021, when it was confirmed that the Earth 1 Aquaman book was indeed canceled. It was indeed dead. And the reason why for this, is the fact that Francis had actually left the company. He wasn't under contract by DC anymore, which effectively killed the book. Because obviously, if Francis is not working for the company, well, obviously that kills any chance of an Earth 1 Aquaman book happening because it was his idea and his vision for it, right? So that's effectively what killed the book, despite some initial excitement and some interesting teases throughout the years. We had mostly radio silence until sadly just a very quick and sudden ending and cancellation to what could have been Earth 1 Aquaman. Now to give you my brief thoughts on this, I think it's a real shame we never got to see Earth 1 Aquaman, especially since Earth 1 as a series had a lot of really interesting reinventions of classic superheroes. You had like Earth 1 Superman, which was a pretty cool take on Superman. You had Earth 1 Green Lantern, which was a radical but really great take on a classic character. And Aquaman to me is kind of like one of those characters that I think is rife for reinvention, absolutely. And it's been done well before with other writers as well, very well. I think Jeff Johns' Aquaman run was fantastic, and taking the spirit of that, right, I think Earth 1 Aquaman could have been great. Now, we have no idea what Francis was planning for the story. I don't know if we'll ever know, to be honest, because, like I said, the book's been canceled for so many years. I doubt we're going to have any more details coming out what it could have been. But overall, I think it would have been very fascinating. I think it's a real shame we never got to see Earth 1 Aquaman. It seemed like this book got some substantial progress being done on it. Like I said, the logo here, and of course that Instagram post and that possible Aquaman drawing. Absolutely, there was some work put into it, but it just sadly none of it never manifested, right? And sadly, just the artist left the company, so kind of just sealed the fate for the book. But like I said, I think it was a true shame we never got to see Aquaman in the Earth One universe. And yeah, I just want to give you my quick thoughts, a little story on Aquaman Earth One. Hope y'all liked the video, and peace.